Smriti-Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashyakrito Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavarthaye Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Before we start the new text, Drigdishya Viveka, there are a couple of questions which have come up. We would like to discuss that. One is directly related to what we've been studying in the Atharvashirshopanishad. As we saw, Atharvashirshopanishad is an Upanishad dedicated to Lord Ganesha and is used both for Upasana and for as a Moksha Jnanam, like any other Upanishad. Upasana essentially refers to karma, kayika karma, vachika karma, and manasika karma. So the question was, this karma that we do is to do with Saguna Brahman. How do we move up to addressing Nirguna Brahma? When we start out on life, all human beings, we start out with a certain amount of confusion relating to the idea of God, Ishvara. And then we formulate our own ideas. What is Ishvara? It depends a lot on our own makeup when we took the Sharira and the environment in which we come up. If the parents have been doing some form of prayers regularly, the child is exposed to that from the very beginning. Traditionally, the children accepted certain things that the parents said without question. Not everything. If the parents said puja has to be done, we accepted it. We may question it later. And we may come to the conclusion this puja is useless. But we start by accepting what the parents do. Yadyatha Shreshtaha Karoti. That is what we follow. Like our friend Prajnananda. I can't get over that interview. One fellow comes and asks him, what is the white mark on your head? You know who Prajnananda is? Prajnananda, something like that. Great chess champion. Beat the world champion twice. And poor fellow, young fellow, I think was about 10 to 11 years old or something like that. What could he say? So he simply said, I don't know, my mother told me, and since childhood I've been doing this. I have no further information on this. So we do puja. Sometimes physically we do puja, light a lamp, put flowers. Like we did yesterday. In our Ekadashi Gita Parayanam, we did puja to Lord Krishna. Then we also do Vachika Puja. Prayers in some form, that also we did yesterday. And we also do Dhyanam, which is Manasika. Japam, Dhyanam, etc. are also karma, but they are Manasika karma. All these we address to a particular form of Ishvara. Like yesterday's puja was all to the form of Ishvara, which we call Lord Krishna. The daily puja we do here is addressed to Lord Ganesha. That is Saguna Brahma. That same Brahman which we've been studying, we assign certain qualities to. We assign a form to. And all the Puranas help us. And to that form, we do our prayer. But in every form of Ishvara that anybody reaches out to, we reach out to because we accept that Ishvara in that form has powers, has knowledge, has Shakti beyond my capability. That is why we go to him. We go to somebody who has more knowledge, more power in any field because we need some problem solved or we need something from that person who has so much more power and knowledge than I do. Even in the Laukika world, we do that. If we have a persistent headache or a persistent bad throat, you go to the doctor. Because we accept that he has more knowledge in that area than I do. And therefore, he'll be able to find a solution for me. So we go to the doctor. Sometimes you may go to a muscle man because he has more power than you have. Sometimes you go to the police. Your neighbor is creating a nuisance. And you keep telling him he doesn't listen. You go to the police because he has more power than you have. In some form, we all accept that that form of Ishvara that we pray to has these powers and this knowledge. Shastra also tells us that. Shastra says that Jagat Karanam Brahma, Saguna Brahma, must have all the knowledge and all the power to create this Jagat. There's so much in this Jagat. You want to create anything, you need to have knowledge and power. whether it is a software or a robot or a computer or a motor vehicle, you need to have both knowledge and power. In the Jagat, usually, it is not one person's knowledge or one person's power. It's a knowledge of combined knowledge and power of a lot of people. Now, if all that is required to create the Jagat is in one entity that we call God and give it various names, we therefore accept that Ishvara, that God is power and knowledge. Now, to this Ishvara, who has all the power and all the knowledge, we pray. To that Saguna Brahman we approach and say, you have all the power, you have all the knowledge, you can give me this, or you can take away this from me, which is causing me distress. That's why you'll find in many of the prayers, it is in praise of the Lord. I come to you because you have the power, or you have the knowledge. Even Arjuna has been doing that all the time. If you remember in your Bhagavad Gita, there is no one better than you to explain this. No one more capable than you to explain this. So we approach Bhagavan, Ishvara, in whichever form we have accepted Ishvara, whichever guna we have attributed to Ishvara, and ask for what we want. Most of the time, people ask for something that is immediate. I have this persistent backache. I have been to all the specialists. Nobody is able to solve this for me. You are not only the super specialist, you are a super specialist for everything. Please get rid of this backache for me. And this prayer, this reaching out to the Saguna Brahman, asking for something immediate. I want to gain something or I want to get rid of something, is based on my own assumption that which I want to get rid of is what is causing me problems. Whether it is a neighbor or a mother-in-law, that which is causing me problems, I want it removed from my life. Because I associate my sense of incompleteness, my sense of sorrow with that particular object or person or relationship. Same thing with asking for something which we think will bring me some sukha. A thinking person repeatedly asks for this and starts wondering where is it going to end? How do I remove the very source of the problem? I have a problem today, and I think I have identified the source as this person. And if the person gets transferred to Timbuktu, that particular sorrow, cause of sorrow is not there. But does sorrow go away? Sorrow doesn't go away. Something else comes up. So the intelligent thinking person will start wondering, is it possible to ever get rid of the very source of which causes sorrow? Not individual sorrow, but sorrow in general. Start wondering, is it possible at all? And if it is possible, how do I go about getting it? Then accidentally or by design, one comes across a book and a talk by somebody, an accidental word somebody dropped, and it strikes the person that there is a book which says, yes, it is possible to root out the sorrow from the very roots. Unmuvulati. That suddenly starts becoming interesting. If such a thing is there, where is it and what is the method by which I can remove this sorrow? That source of knowledge, of removing this cause, very fundamental cause of sorrow, he discovers is available only in Shastra. Then he studies the Shastra. Enough punya he has to find a guru who teaches him. And the guru says, you don't have any sorrow. Guruji, 40 years I've spent my life, I had mostly sorrow. Why can't you say I don't have sorrow? So the Guru says, who has sorrow? I. And the Guru says, think again. So if the person has certain confidence in that Guru, despite the fact that it doesn't sound possible, he continues to work with the Guru. He accepts that there is possible. Somewhere I'm missing the idea. Then he has been praying to this Ishvara, who is all power and all knowledge all this time, for getting rid of an immediate sorrow or getting rid of something which creates a longing in him. And he accepts that that Ishvara is all power, all knowledge. So he says, can that Ishvara help me understand this? To the same Saguna Brahma, he prays. He says, help me get rid of the very fundamental cause of sorrow. Then he begins to understand that this Ishvara that he's been praying to, in whichever form he's been praying to, is only a form. What he's praying to is an Ishvara who is infinite. And if it is infinite, he cannot have a form. He cannot have a location. He cannot even have guna. My God, this is a complete quantum jump from what he's been doing all this time, praying to a Saguna Brahma to whom he has given a form. He's attributed certain strengths and qualities to that form. Suddenly he's told, he understands that whatever he's been asking for to this Ishvara is only a medium. That request has to go to the form which is infinite, therefore amurti, no form. That can become very confusing. To gain that, you would have heard this before, he needs that Ishvara's grace, that Ishvara who is with form, with guna, that Ishvara's blessing. And the blessing of Shastra, which is the source of knowledge. And the blessing of the Guru. And if all of these are there available to him, and if he has lived life right, I'm going to define what is living life right, then there is a very good opportunity, very good chance for him to gain access to that Nirguna Brahman. If that Nirguna Brahman has no form, no location, no attribute of any kind, clearly it is not something which is like accessing something with a form. I can be marginally disturbed in my mind and still continue my prayer to Lord Ganesha or to any other Lord. But if I have to access Nirguna Brahman, all that I used for doing my prayers and the various Kayika, Vachika and Manasika karma do not provide me the capacity to access this. If there is even the slightest disturbance, now you look at what causes disturbance. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan is very clear. Only two things will cause you disturbance. Anything that one does which has a sense of adharma, because that is what creates inner conflict. You know it is adharma. Nobody has to teach anybody what is dharma, what is adharma. Knowing that the acting I is going against the knowing eye. There is a conflict. And you know, any conflict creates disturbance. And the other is any action based on raga and dvesha. If I do something because I want something that I think I like, even if it does give me temporary sense of pleasure on achieving that, it is subject to causing disturbance. Any raga, any dvesha. So when I say living right, it simply means that one lives a life of dharma, which is very easy if one really comes down to it. And does not allow raga dvesha to take charge of his decisions and actions, which is more difficult. We are so conditioned to do what gives us instant pleasure and run away from what we think gives us immediate pain, that it is extremely difficult. And then you justify it by saying a bird in hand is better than two in the bush. Generally, religion tells you that if you live a life like this, which means you do not access the immediate pleasure immediate things which you think will give you pleasure, because they're driving you away from yourself. Then after death, you will get something. That's two in the bush. But once you begin to understand the study of Vedanta, just know, just like you're saying that you're going to get this little pleasure by eating the ice cream. Once you gain this knowledge, this is immediate, here and now. So this Nirguna Brahma Upasana, not even Upasana, once you go to Nirguna Brahma, it is really knowledge, is something which will happen when one consistently remains within the ambit of the grace of Ishvara, all power, all knowledge, Saguna Brahma, and continues to live a life which is not driven by raga dvesha. Raga dvesha in turn pushes one to be adharmic. So the simple answer to that question, how do I move from Saguna Brahma to Nirguna Brahma? Stay in prayer to Saguna Brahma. Recognize that there is something more than immediate benefits you can gain from giving into raga dvesha. And that gain can be one's own here and now, then that transition can take place. That is why in many places it is said, people who are doing karma, karma here means Vaidika karma, Nityanamitika karma, do not disturb them. Do not go and tell them, this karma is useless. What you need is knowledge, jnanam, and that is what you need to work on, moksha. Shastra says that. Do not disturb them. They are still in the process of working towards it. Allow them to do karma. So the move from Saguna Brahma Upasana to gaining that knowledge of Nirguna Brahma, which is you, is a process which does not require any effort from one. I continue to do what I do with my daily Nitya karma, and I do continue to do my prayers to Saguna Brahman. And with enough punya, I expose myself to the Shastra with the help of a guru. The result is automatic. This is on autopilot. No further effort is required by the individual. So one need only to focus on working with Saguna Brahma in any form you want. That is why we have the Ishtadevata. And elevate one's own prayers to Saguna Brahman while not giving up all this Laukika Sukha. Continue to enjoy them when you get them. But that does not, that is not the focus. That move will come automatically. Saguna Brahma, karma, kayika, vachika, and manasika karma, one simply continues. Therefore, karma yoga. I do what I need to do. Rest will have followed. That is why Bhagavad Gita in the first few chapters makes it so easy. You simply follow what is to be done. That's a related question. Before we go to that, that's why when we do this Atharvashirshopanishad, every day in prayer to Lord Ganesha, initially we do only as a prayer to Saguna Brahman. Although we saw there are strong elements of moksha jnanam there. That will come automatically. Continue to do prayer. The related question has to do with that compound dukkha sanyoga viyoga. Yoga means joining, attachment. Comes from the dhatu yuj. We add the prefix san yoga. It only indicates a strength to that verb. And viyoga indicates the opposite. Away from that attachment, away from the joining. In the Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, Bhagavan defines yoga as dukkha sanyoga viyoga. Yoga itself has so many meanings. That also comes from Yuj only. But in the context of what we're trying to understand, we are wanting to get rid of dukkha. And because we have dukkha and we also have sukha as a human being, we can constantly say, there's so much dukkha here, can I get rid of this and leave only sukha? Devatas have mostly sukha. Animals have no capacity to discriminate. They also have sukha and they also have dukkha in the form of pain, etc. But they have no ability to discriminate. They take whatever comes as it comes. It's only in the human form that we have this ability, and we also want to get rid of the dukkha. Not the dukkha itself, Bhagavan says. I am attached to the dukkha. I am a dukhi. I create the dukkha. How can I get rid of this sanyoga with dukkha? Can I do it at all in the first place? Can this attachment to dukkha, can it ever be got rid of? Or like an animal, do I simply have to accept it and move forward? As human beings, we have this capacity. We can ask questions. What is Atma? The self. What is Anatma? The non-self. And then start thinking. Initially, we say the self is whatever is contained within the extremities of the Sharira. And everything else is Anatma. Now you have a very funny situation that for each human form, there's a different Atma and different Anatma. As far as I'm concerned, you're Anatma. As far as you're concerned, I'm Anatma. Makes one think. Makes one consider that there is something wrong in my understanding of Atma, Anatma, Viveka. Something I'm missing, something I'm not able to identify correctly. So Shastra is very clear. In here, the Bhagavan says the yogi is one who is able to detach from the attachment to sorrow. Dukkha sanyoga viyoga. That is yoga. The definition Bhagavan gives. Unless I can identify correctly where I have made a mistake between Atma and Atma, this Sanyoga does not go. Which is the lot of almost every human being. But if one gets to the state when one accepts that it is possible, that's an excellent starting point. And there are enough clues and hints in our own lives which tell us that there are certain errors in my thinking. I draw certain conclusions and inferences based on certain data and inputs which I collect from during the life. Even though one part of my brain says there is something wrong in that inference, it has become my inference, my conclusion, and therefore I defend it tooth and nail. And when I do that, there is no chance of a viyoga. If that viyoga has to take place, one has to understand Atma and Anatma correctly. Atma Anatma Viveka is the only way that will happen. For that, like I said, the first step is that acceptance that it is possible, acceptance of the Shastra as the pramana for making it possible. With that Shraddha, all of you have been attending classes, doing Shravanam for a significant amount of time, which is indicative of the fact that one has certain Shraddha. Even though it is still confusing, even though it is still uncertain, something is there, that feeling is there, that Shraddha is there. There has to be something which I have not understood. Even though it looks like at the end of few classes, it is very clear. The words are very clear. But I still go back and act the way I have been acting earlier. I realize that. And therefore I look at it and say, okay, I need to continue to do this till I get clarity. That will come only through continued Shravanam and Mananam. So the answer to that question, what is Sanyoga Viyoga? In fact, you should always add that first part, Dukkha Sanyoga Viyoga, which is yoga. I need to get there, and the method that Shastra tells us is through continued Shravanam and Mananam. Ideally, this should be happening 24 hours, all 7 days of the week in the mind. When that opportunity arises, grab it. Otherwise, our mind has a tendency to keep going back into same error that we make earlier. But in time, with Shraddha, with consistent commitment, this will also happen. Dukkha Sanyoga Viyoga. When we studied the Bhagavad Gita, those of you who were there in the Gita class, when we were doing the chapter 6, Shankaracharya has spent a lot of time in writing the Bhashyam on this also. And therefore, in the Gita home study, there are pages and pages explaining this. What is Sanyoga Viyoga? It is relevant in the 6th chapter, where the chapter talks about Dhyanam and goes on to talk about yoga. That is Sanyoga Viyoga. We study this and try and gain this knowledge from the only source it is available to us, available to mankind, is the Upanishads. And every Upanishad, including the Atharvashirshopanishad we studied, the central theme is Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. What a Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmosmi, and many others. Any Vakya that explains the Aikyam between two apparently radically different entities, on the surface of which it's impossible to accept that there is Aikyam, that is called a Mahavakya. Not that it is a big Vakya. Mahatvakya because it tells about the only thing to know and understand, which will clear all the errors that we make about what the assumptions we make on I, the Atma. That's why you have all these interesting stories like the 10th man, where I am making a mistake. You know, when you listen to the 10th man story, you all know the story. The first thought that often comes to the mind is, what a foolish fellow. He is not counting himself, he is counting all the other people. But if we introspect, we are making the same mistake. That fellow is making whom we call Mudha. We are making the same mistake. So Dashama story is something one can laugh at. But one stops and thinks, how am I any different from the 10th man? And would probably study this a little bit more carefully. And this is so subtle a knowledge. I am hesitant to use the word subtle because I can't think of a better word. That you can't even say, I know. We studied this in great detail in when we did the last Upanishad, Kena Upanishad. Can't even say I know. That fine-edged knowledge about myself is summed up in these pithy sentences. Tattvamasi. So if somebody is an adhikari, mentally and otherwise very well prepared, and goes to a guru and says, teach me. Guru says, sit down. Tattvamasi. He can go home. So nothing else. We've been doing so many classes, so many Upanishads. We're saying the same thing over and over again. And if we'll continue to do more classes, we'll continue to do the same thing. And yet it does not sink in. Can you make it a little easier for me to understand? Shastra tries to do that, tries to make it easier. And great scholars have also made an effort to make it easier. We have rishis like Vyasa, given us Bhagavad Gita, which is a little bit more easy to understand. And we have also given us a lot of other granthas. Now, there are also many other granthas in the world, even modern granthas, which attempt to simplify this knowledge for us to understand. But many of them lack one very important thing. The person who writes this grantha has to be steeped in Shastra, in Upanishads. Otherwise, he or she will put in his or her own thinking into that. The moment you put in your own thinking into that, it is always subject to limitation. That is why the teaching tradition becomes important. What my guru taught me, what his guru taught him, and what I am trying to teach is not mine. Neither the methodology nor the subject matter is mine. It comes from many, many layers of gurus. The moment I try to put in my 2 bits into that, I immediately bind it. You can use different language. You can use different examples more relevant to the modern day world. But the fundamentals remain what they were right at the beginning. That is why Sadashiva Samarambham and then all the other Vyasa, Shankara, etc. Asmadacharya Paryantam. My Acharya did not say anything new. To that parampara I salute. It is not knowledge I create. So the person who is steeped in this completely and has really realized, understood this knowledge, when he or she writes a grantha, a text, to help us understand what the Upanishads say, it may be easier to study that grantha than to directly read the Upanishad. There is a catch, however. Unless you have studied the Upanishad for a while, unless you've done a lot of Shravanam, what he says will not make sense. Because what he's saying is what is in the Upanishad. So we start by praying. Every class we say, Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam. A person who is steeped in Shruti, Smriti, Purana. Why Smriti and Purana? You said Shruti is the only thing. Yes. But Smriti and Purana also say the same thing. But they take one aspect of what Shruti is trying to say and elaborate upon it in a fashion through stories and through other means, which makes it easier to understand that particular aspect. Shruti is the base. It is apaurusheya, accessible to the rishis, from whom we have got this knowledge. Arsha Vidya, that which has come from the rishis. So if there is something which looks contrary in the Smriti or Purana to what the Shruti says, then one has to examine that very carefully and resolve that contradiction. Anything which says exactly what the Shruti says is also Upanishad. I am willing to accept any religious grantha as Upanishad if it says the same thing as Upanishad. If it says Tattvamasi. But if it says anything different, I have to examine it and see where is the contradiction. Just as much as I would examine my own conclusions, my own inferences, when they differ from what the Shruti says, I have to reconcile. I know in the back of my mind that my thinking, my buddhi has its own boundaries of limitations. And therefore, when I draw conclusions, I'm drawing conclusions based on incomplete and often irrelevant data. Therefore, contradiction with the Shruti. So when we say Shruti, Smriti, Purananam, all are included. In many places, you'll find the Puranas also the same Mahavakya. In most of the Sahasranama, you will find Mahavakya. Although it looks like prayer of 1,000 names to a particular form of Ishvara. We will continue this discussion on this idea of a grantha, prakarana grantha, tomorrow. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Harihi Om.